Did a good job. Yeah. Five. Okay, I'll call this special meeting of this City Council meeting for Powell River for December 10th, 2024, and acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin people who have lived here for over 10,000 years. Go right into adoption of the agenda. Would you like to move we adopt the agenda? Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Alameda. Any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. We have no minutes to discuss at this special meeting, no delegations I'm aware of, no correspondence, no committee reports, and no committee recommendations. So that brings us all the way down to item number 7, reports for decision. And we have 7.1. And our acting CAO might want to say a couple.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll ask that Mr. Bertig give a quick introduction for this report, and also note that we do have Mr. Ringma from BC Transit here as well, joining us to answer any questions. Mr. Bertig.
Okay. Thank you, Mallory. Through the chair, this report for decision is with regards to the transit improvement program that we would put forward to BC Transit and the province for their consideration. You recall in the past year, we had put forward some additional hours to cover some route management, and we put that forward to BC Transit. Unfortunately, we were not able to receive the support from the province and transit because the demand exceeded availability of funds. This year, we'd like to put forward those same hours with some increases to include 2,700 hours, as well as 3 buses to accommodate the increase in service frequency and service span lengths on routes 1 and 2. Additional hours have also been added to address performance issues so that we can provide adequate operator recovery within the transit system, as we are fall behind on a number of our routes. This would be scheduled, should we receive approval, scheduled for implementation in January 2026 for an estimated net cost to the city of just over $303,000. The second initiative that we would like to put forward is 2,400 hours and 2 buses, and this would act as a placeholder so that we can provide some on-demand service through BC Transit in 2026. The net cost to the city is estimated at $234,000, which is similar to today's costs for operating the Zunga service. So what we are recommending is that council agrees to submit both of these initiatives to the TIPS program in hopes that we can receive matching funding. So I'll leave it for questions, and a reminder that we have Rob Ringma from BC Transit to answer any technical questions, I would say.
Okay, just before we get to questions, Mr. Ringma, would you like to make any introductory comments about the report?
Yeah, if I could, through the chair. Thanks very much. Great to, sorry I couldn't be there in person today, but great to see council again. Yeah, Torge did a very good job of explaining the two initiatives. The only thing I would add is that initiative 1, the 2,700 hours to support routes 1 and 2, that initiative is supported through the Powell River Transit System Vision and Goals that was developed by the Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Committee back in 2019. Of course, then COVID hit and the transit world kind of got turned upside down. So the last 2 years, council has endorsed very similar priorities similar to this one. And then in 2022, Powell River staff also worked with WSP to pen a transit report that also outlined increasing that frequency along routes 1 and 2. That's just basically going to increase the frequency of the transit service overall and between kind of key centers and neighborhoods along that spine. So, you know, we would work directly with staff, obviously, to finalize some of those pieces. On the second initiative, just the 2,400 hours, you know, we have put that as a placeholder, as for Mr. Bertig had mentioned. Really, that is kind of a placeholder as we go through and finish this our 2025 transit service review for Powell River. We kind of want to put a placeholder in there. We're obviously going to explore on-demand options through that review, but the challenge is with the cycle of the transit improvement program. If we don't put that initiative in this year, that second initiative would be for implementation in January 2026. If we don't put that placeholder initiative in this year, we'd have to wait another full year to activate on that, on any other initiatives that we want to activate out of the transit service review. So that would push it to 2027. And I know this council has quite a bit of debate around on-demand service and those pieces. And I've been in front of council committing to trying to get you some results or some priorities, initiatives as expeditiously as possible. So this is the way for us to be able to activate on some of those priorities coming out of the service review. So yeah, I would leave it at that. Take any questions that anyone may have.
Okay, so I'm going to try doing this the way we've done it last week and start with the round of questions from everybody at the table. Councillor Southcott, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
No? Councillor Alameda.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple questions that might be for either Mr. Ringma or maybe for Ms. Denniston as well. We'll start with the finance end of it. Last year when we had Mr. Ringma here, we had earmarked some funds for, I believe, the 2025 budget. I think it was around the tune of 185, if I'm not mistaken. And then BC Transit wasn't able to, I think, fulfill on the buses, if I remember correctly. So I imagine, I haven't had a chance to fully go through draft 1 yet, but I imagine that those funds are no longer in draft 1 because we knew that wasn't going to happen. And then we're talking about the second year of now the next phase of the next 5 years. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's fully correct.
Thank you. And then Mr. Ringma, just a confirmation, I guess, appreciate you coming to us with these opportunities. I guess there's still the chance that both of these options may not come through, just depending on how things come together with BC Transit. But if we don't request them, then definitely nothing's going to come through. So in the end, we might still be neutral, but this is us doing our due diligence to get the ball rolling and show BC Transit that we'd like to take these steps, right?
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Armida, for the question. Yes, it's correct. So the way the BC Transit process or transit improvement process works, based on the BC Transit Act and the legislative funding formula, is BC Transit needs to seek approval from local governments first for the cost of these initiatives, and then we sum those initiatives up across the province into our total ask, our service plan ask to the province for matching funding. And then unfortunately we wait till the province tables its budget, which is typically February. Here this year it may be a little bit later, closer to March. And then hopefully I'll be able to reach out to staff and let them know that we've been successful in securing the hours and the buses that we need in order to implement these expansions.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. So just trying to catch up a bit from the last time we talked to you, Mr. Ringma, and we at that time talked about quite a few different things. So last year's budget, when we approved it, would have had room in it for some expanded hours that we thought were coming in last year, I believe. Was that removed, or what happened to that?
Through the chair, Councillor Elliott, so last year, this council did approve a very similar initiative with around, I think it was slightly less hours. It was only 2,000 hours. To Mr. Bertig's points, we have, with the relocation of the town center mall, with some on-time performance challenges we're having with some operator kind of considerations, we've added some additional hours in there to try to alleviate some of those challenges that we've kind of seen over the last couple of years. Your council approved that, but then we were not able to secure the funding and the fleet to implement that initiative this year. So now we've basically made a couple adjustments to that initiative based on feedback from Powell River staff and transit operations, and now we're proposing a slightly updated revision of last year's proposal.
Okay, but we did do some increases in hours due to some of those challenges that we were having. And then this is 2,000 additional, or that would include some of those shifts, or were there no shifts?
The only changes, and I'll maybe let Mr. Bertig speak to this, but through the chair, the only changes we did make last year were with the relocation of the town center mall exchange. So we're able to make some small changes there, but we have not actually injected any new hours into the Powell River conventional transit system over the last 2 years. Okay.
So then the other thing we were talking about the last time you were here with us was Powell River being on the list of communities to pilot something in particular to start soon, I thought next year. Can you help me remember what that was and tell me where that's at?
Yeah, for sure. Through the chair, Councillor Elliott, so we have just completed or just completing our on-demand pilot project in Kelowna. So that's the phase 1 of our on-demand project, where we're testing out the fleet type, the technology, all of the different operational pieces related to that. And we did have the City of Powell River on our list for phase 2 communities for on-demand service. So I think that in kind of phase 2, we're limiting the rollout initially to probably only 5 or 6 communities. So Powell River is on that list. Again, we're waiting for provincial approval of our transit budget, and then hopefully we'll have some good news to some of those phase 2 communities in the new year. That's one of the reasons why we've put that second initiative into this transit improvement MOU, the 2,400 hours for transit priorities resulting from the transit service review, because if we are approved for the dollars, and we can move forward with a phase 2 of digital, on-demand service in Powell River, then obviously we could move and work with the City of Powell River towards that. If the City of Powell River, I'll just kind of put a little caveat there, if the City of Powell River decides it wants to continue with its own Zunga bus service, we could reallocate those 2,400 hours that are currently in the TIPS MOU to another initiative that's a priority or identified priority in the transit service review process that we're going through right now.
Right. So I think we were trying to bridge to BC Transit taking on demand and contributing to the data that you would have that would be more relevant to our community for getting approval for that. So if the Zunga bus is not continued between now and the Initiative 2, it doesn't impact the success of our approval for Initiative 2. Is that a safe assumption, or?
That is a safe assumption, yes. And I will full disclosure. Previously, when we'd have our transit MOUs, one of the stipulations was that if a local council approved a transit initiative and then decided not to implement those hours, that we could hold them liable for the first year of lease fees on the vehicle. But I can be pretty transparent and say that we do feel like the demand for expansions is going to outstrip the supply of funding and potentially fleet that we have. So I can say with some confidence that if Powell River decided that they did not want to move forward with the 2,400 hours, provided that we could find a home for the fleet, which as I just mentioned, should not be an issue, we would not look to hold you accountable for that. But the 2,400 hours and what you'll see in the MOU, we've left it fairly generic. So it will leave council and staff the opportunity to either allocate that towards a on-demand service, potentially replacement of Zunga, or if not, we can allocate those hours wherever staff and the city directs us to do so.
And then last question, if I may, through the chair, are you receiving updated information around our Zunga bus that is helpful to you at this time?
Yes, through the chair. Councilor Elliott, thanks for the question. We, of course, we've started our transit service review within the Powell River region. We have established a working group in terms of reference with the City of Powell River, the Cathett Regional District, Tla'amin First Nation, BC Ferries is also involved. So that's kind of our key working group. Through that working group, the City of Powell River is working, as are all the other partners, to provide as much information as they have available to BC Transit to help us with our transit service review. Of course, we have a public survey out there, so I have to do a quick shout out publicly for our transit survey. Please, by all means, fill out any transit riders and non-transit riders. Please take the time to fill out our transit survey that's currently open to the public. And then in the new year, we will actually do a key stakeholder session as well. So I know there's been some requests from your accessibility and inclusion committee. So we'll reach out to them. We'll do some invite-only stakeholder sessions. And then finally, we will actually do some public open house sessions before we conclude that. So there'll be some very robust stakeholder and public engagement. But sorry, I kind of rambled on a bit about the service review and gave props to the service review. But going back to your question, yes, we've been working very closely with your staff. They've provided us lots of interesting and great information that we're using as part of our review, because we are reviewing on-demand services and the best applications of on-demand service within the Powell River region as we go through this review.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Palm.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. First of all, Mr. Rigba, I just want to, on a positive note, say thank you for your continued support in terms of our bus shelters here at our new Town Center Mall facility. That is greatly appreciated. And as always, listening to you, it's always a pleasure, either whether you're on screen or in person, to hear your support for Powell River. And I hear today that you're very much involved with our service review, and you're very up to date on what's happening in town. So I appreciate your comments. I don't have any particular questions, Mr. Rigba, other than to say it's nice to see that this report alludes to future upgrades of our system, which gives us a little additional time as we survey our budget going forward and make the appropriate decisions on a go-forward basis. So again, appreciate it greatly, and I will be supporting the motion before us today. Thank you very much.
Councillor Isaacson. Councillor Isaacson, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. One question, you mentioned, Mr. Ringma, that this second initiative is like a placeholder. It really depends on the results of your the transit review and then what is requested by City of BC Transit. Now, you mentioned the WRS report earlier, and there were some recommendations from there that weren't supported by BC Transit. And so I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the second initiative and like where are the asks or where are the suggestions or intentions around what that second initiative would look like come from, who they're asked by, who approves them, how does that work?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Isaacson. I appreciate that question. It's a great question. So yeah, we know that you currently have Zungabus operating in the Powell River region. Through previous conversations with council, there has been some appetite to explore on-demand options with BC Transit. So we clearly know, and you see it in the staff report, that we've kind of earmarked that is what I would say the first potential opportunity to utilize those resources. So I'll kind of say that to me is kind of the number one priority, and that is driven by staff, because ultimately at the end of the day, it is staff and this council that make the final decisions on those services and where we place them. BC Transit provides data analysis expertise. We work closely with our local government partners, but ultimately, as in this forum right here, we have to present to council. Council needs to approve because there's a cost of transit that is translated down to your taxpayers. So I think that's quite appropriate process. If we talk about, so if that's kind of priority, what we've kind of identified as potentially priority one, what if we don't go forward with that priority? Well, that really is why we're working on this transit service review. We haven't done a transit service review in the Powell River region for quite some time. And what we like to do is we like to have or build up a Rolodex of priorities, transit priorities within the region. How we do that, I mentioned it before, public, stakeholder, and obviously Powell River, City Powell River engagement, to develop kind of a prioritized sequence of different transit initiatives that we should look to move forward with. And they will be prioritized. And you'll see me come back to council, most likely with one of our senior transit planners, to actually present that and those options to council at a later date once that review is done. So when we have this Rolodex of options, then we now know that if we don't use the 2,400 hours for a on-demand service, well, what's next? And we can go to that Rolodex and look at the options. And then again, we would engage your staff, we would engage your council, and ultimately we would probably propose several options based on that Rolodex of options. And it would be ultimately up to council and staff to decide what direction they'd like to move forward.
Thank you. And then second question, Chair, if I may. There's amounts that are shared in the report, and I just want to confirm for myself or the public who might be listening in, the amounts that are in the report for the first initiative is 303,000, the second initiative is 234. Those are net to the city, and so BC Transit contributes approximately the same amount to cover the cost of those services. Is that correct?
Yes, so that is the net municipal share of the costs through the legislated formulas, cost sharing formula in the BC Transit Act. It's 50 for conventional transit systems. It's 53% is borne by the local government partner, and BC Transit makes up the other 47% for both of those initiatives.
And so just a quick follow up on that. The second initiative, if it was on demand, that annual cost, if another proportion is provided by BC Transit, looks like the cost of an on-demand service might double. Is that like if it's approximately doing what Zungabus does now, and if the cost to the city in the future is 234, again, it's not an exact comparison, but it seems like the cost of that might increase. Can you maybe describe where that number comes from?
Yeah, for sure. I can say so. A couple points on that because we haven't fully developed our on-demand program. What we had to do is we had to cost those hours out at kind of our conventional service rate. So it's 2 light-duty buses. So they're light-duty buses. It's slightly more hours, I believe, than is currently in the Zunga bus service. But then a couple other pieces that come in there is the fact that within that initiative, it would become a BC Transit service. So BC Transit would manage the planning, the scheduling, the data, all of those pieces that are currently being managed by City of Powell River staff. Those functions would come in-house to BC Transit, and then we would just liaise directly with staff. So as opposed to right now, Tor and staff are getting all of the data directly from the company that you're using. BC Transit would get that data, and we would just relay that to staff. So you can think of all of the different functions: marketing, scheduling, not so much operations because you guys run operations in-house, but we would assume a lot of those costs as well. That I guess I would call kind of hidden costs between operating that you have while you're operating the Zunga bus service.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's my turn for questions. So I'm just looking at the report. Under the first option, the first edition of 2,700 hours of service would cost the taxpayer in 2025 $32 for an average single-family dwelling. Am I correct on that? Yeah, well.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, and there is $250,000 budgeted in 2025 for the Zunga bus, but that's not, none of that is coming from BC Transit. All that is coming from city reserves.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thanks. And I just want to point out to everybody in the room that the recommendations that are actually in the electronic agenda are different than the ones that I had in the printed agenda. So just for Mr. Galinsky and other people in the room, the recommendations might be different than what you. Anyone have any other questions? No? Anybody like to make a motion? Councillor Alameda.
I move that the draft I'm reading the wrong one. That would help.
Like you're reading the open.
I was going further into the agenda already. I move that council direct staff to sign the BC Transit Powell River Transit Proposed Expansion Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, dated October 1st, 2024. I'm reading these all together, I believe.
Yep.
Okay. And that council amend City of Powell River 5-year financial plan, Bylaw 2742-2024 to include $303,158 starting in 2026 for an additional 2,700 hours of service and 3 expansion buses to accommodate an increase in service frequency and service span length on routes 1 and 2. And that council provide an additional 2,400 hours and 2 buses as a placeholder to implement strategic priorities as identified in the 2022 service discussion document memo, which could include on-demand service in 2026 at an estimated net municipal cost of $234,094.
Seconded by Councillor Pong. Councillor Alameda, would you like to speak on that?
I'm basically similar to the questions I had before. As Mr. Rigma said, we're trying to plan ahead in the future as per BC Transit's planning timeline, and there's a chance one or none of these might come to fruition in the end. But if we don't plan for it, and don't request it, we can't have any of it. So this is just getting the process started, which I believe we should do, and I imagine the conversation will continue in the next year or two as we. As the moment comes forward.
Elliott.
I apologize. I've come up with a question, and I know the motion's on the floor, but my question was the carry forward initiative, which is initiative 1 for 2,700 hours, is 700 hours more than the 2,000 that was proposed at first. So I'm just curious about what the original 2,000 would cost, and why are we looking at that additional 700 hours? And if someone could explain that, that would be greatly appreciated.
Through the chair, maybe I'll take the first crack at that question, and then maybe Mr. Bertig would like to follow up. Again, one of the pieces as we each year, as we go through this process and other operational pieces come up in a transit system, we try to adjust for those as we move along that continuum. So it's partially a derivative of us not being able to achieve that initiative last year, and then looking at the system and what other pieces could we improve. So I think Mr. Bertig had mentioned things like the town center mall and the exchange, and the slight relocation of that exchange has cost us a little bit of time in our schedule. Every single bus route goes through that exchange, so it kind of extrapolates or exponentially grows over that time. And what it's done is really impacted driver break times, where some of our drivers, based on the schedule and the condensedness of the schedule, actually don't have time for biological breaks. So part of the 700 hours is to help solve some of those operational pinch points that we've seen. I would say there's probably a bit of an inflationary piece there as well in terms of the costing, just because as we all know, the inflationary effects that we've seen, although they're starting to slow down a little bit now, they've still been a little bit cost wary. I don't know if Mr. Bertig has anything else he'd like to add.
Through the chair, no, I think that was well spoken. Yeah, those extra hours predominantly are to provide some bathroom breaks for our drivers that are not able to accommodate that with our current schedule, and as well, it adds to frustration with the drivers on for their lack of ability to keep on schedule.
Okay.
And sorry, just as a follow-up, and that has been a bit of a challenge that we've experienced over the last year and a half, is our on-time performance is increasingly seeming to be eroding. So it will help us to make sure that our drivers are able to actually execute the schedule that is published. Fancy that we want to try to make sure that our transit schedule is relative to what the service is on the road.
And then the question for me then is, the 27 hours gets us from a frequency of what to a frequency of what for busing?
Yeah, through the chair, thanks for the question. So I think the ultimate goal, what we're working towards is what's outlined in the Powell River Transit Vision's Vision and Goals document that was endorsed by Council and the Climate Change Mitigation Adaptation Committee back in 2019, which would look for us to develop what we call a frequent transit network along kind of the key corridor or spine route within Powell River that would get us I think for us, the minimum would be like 30-minute frequency. The maximum we'd probably be targeting in a high investment scenario would be 15-minute frequency. So what happens, Councillor, just so you're aware, we work with staff, we come up with a game plan and calculate the hours. And then once we have it approved, that's when we really start to do some of the detailed planning and design. So I would be happy to come back to council as we hopefully achieve approval, not only from locally here, but also from the province, to make sure that you guys are very engaged and aware of how we use those 2,700 hours to implement it. But it will be with the goal of trying to get to that kind of 30 to 15-minute frequency eventually. I don't know if the 2,700 hours will get us to 15-minute frequency, but I think it'll definitely make a good step forward in terms of increasing those frequencies.
And just for my own awareness, what's our frequency at right now? Like on average?
It varies route to route. Mr. Bertig, I don't know if you have a comment there you want to make.
I mean, what route 1 and 2, those are the main routes.
Yeah, I think through the chair, sorry. I think currently routes 1 and 2, the predominant routes during, in the business hours is 30-minute frequency, approximately.
We have a motion on the floor, and Councillor Isaacson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair. I support this motion because it covers two things. One, we've been trying for incremental improvements for a few years, so they haven't been funded. The province is overextended and we haven't been picked, and so we're just slowly catching up, adding improvements every year, and every year they would cost more if they were implemented. And now we're ideally, if we get approved, we'd be catching up with quite a few service improvements. And the second initiative part, which is the part for the unknown, is, as Mr. Ringma said, a placeholder. So it would be to be determined what that looks like based on the service review, and would it involve a different MOU perhaps to establish what that would actually look like and whether council decided to pursue it. But it is a placeholder. We can't get it if we don't ask for it now. It would not be a possibility at all if we didn't approve this. Whereas there is an opportunity, if the need be, to change our minds in the future, depending on what options came back to us. But at least this gets us in the queue for further improvements in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isaacson. So my 2 bits worth in here. I don't see any other hands up. So what we have here is a question of, are we going to spend money on improved transit? It's a service improvement, and that's what we're talking about. The budget or the report is fairly clear. We approve this. It's going to cost taxpayers in 2025 about $32 for the average single-family home. And I'm going to vote in favor of it because I think it reaches an environmental target and a community target for a whole bunch of reasons. Having more frequent, more direct transit opportunities is a better way to get around town, good way to avoid greenhouse gases. I just filled out the transit service survey, I think, a day or two before this meeting, and I don't use transit because it's difficult for me, particularly, to get from my home in Wildwood to a council meeting without taking an excessive length of time. And I answered on the survey that more frequent service and a more direct route would be a good idea. And I think probably there's a lot of other people answering those questions the same way. The fact is, to do that, you have to have more hours of service, and they cost money. And I realize it's not popular nowadays for a politician to say they'd like to cost the residential taxpayer some more money, but that's the truth of what's going to happen here. I'm doing it, I think, for a trade-off to get better service. The whole Zunga bus question will be, I'm sure, a matter of spirited debate when we come to the 2025 budget and how much the city is willing to pay for that. That's my 2 bits worth. If anybody else has got anything to say. Councillor Palm?
Just through the chair, one clarifying point that you made, Chair Doubt, and that is you said that the $32 per household would take effect in 2025. Is that correct? Or are we talking 2026?
CFO, answer.
So the chair, the changes would take place in 2026.
Very much.
Okay, I was wrong. Miscalculation. I thought but I think maybe we don't get the service improvement until 2026 too. So all in favor of the motion in front of us? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Ringma. I don't think you're staying for the airport runway expansion, are you?
No, but I wish you well with that. Thank you very much, and happy holidays to you, Chair, and then the rest of the councillors. Much appreciate your time.
Look forward to seeing you next time.
Yes, sir.
We're zipping along to item number 7.2, Airport Runway 09 Clearway. Mr. Vertig, do you have something? Or the CAO, did you want to make any comments first?
Through the chair, I'll invite Mr. Bertig to comment on this report before opening it up to questions. Thank you, Mr. Bertig.
Thank you, Chair. The report in front of you. So a little background. we received funding potentially up to $8 million for runway rehab. And that work was not necessarily completed, but the runway was opened June 9th of this year. So it was completed on schedule, meeting most of our objectives, such as rehabbing the aging infrastructure. You're well aware that the pavement was well beyond its useful life. We were able to come into compliance with federal regulations as well, reduce the slope to 1.5%, add 146 feet in runway length, as well as safety areas on both ends of the runway, upgrade electrical infrastructure, and get into an AGN 3A classification. As you're also aware, our runway is considered a short runway and is limited geographically. While we were able to increase capacity and safety for Pacific Coastal's Beach 1900 departures in both directions, as well increase the SOB's westward departures. But there are some runway characteristics or geographical characteristics that impact our local carrier and others that utilize our airport. So just to provide some clarification, the Clearway is that area beyond the end of the runway that is to be free of obstacles and intended to provide an additional margin of safety during the aircraft's initial climb after takeoff. Clearways are not a requirement, and many runways do not have clearways. So prior to construction, under the TP312 4th edition, the old regulations, we were able to declare a 700-foot clearway at the east end. But following some additional early surveys, in March, we confirmed with Pacific Coastal that no clearway would be available for runway 09. And initially, we heard back from Pacific Coastal that they could see increases in payload capacity for their aircraft with the declared distances as designed. But then in June, we were in fact told that allowable takeoff weights for departures to the east would be reduced for some of their aircraft, specifically the SOB at that time. Following completion of our project, we started to look at ways to address the challenge for the lack of clearway to the east end. So under the classification that we are currently classified under, the AGN 3A, it requires a clearway slope of 2.5%. That's the takeoff surface. Well, that slope impacts the No Name Hill, which is east of Hamill Lake. It runs smack in the middle of it. Under a lesser classification, AGN 2, that slope is 4%, so it's an increased slope. And what we determined was that with the 4% slope and some clearway, which is at even a reduced slope, we were able to clear the terrain of that hill by just over 11 feet. So we estimated that we could, in fact, have a 200 to 300 foot clearway. But the big but in here is the extent of vegetation penetration, which we did not have a clear picture and would still need some some further determinations, some LiDAR survey and analysis to determine what that extent is. But using our existing mapping that we have for that, and assuming a tree height of 25 to 30 feet, the clearing of vegetation is going to be extensive. And perhaps if I could get to IT just to show that that image of the hill area that shows how much vegetation would be required to be cleared. And it's with this early assumption, we're looking at 25 to 35 acres of vegetation that would not only have to be cleared, but as well, we would have to have a vegetation management to ensure that that vegetation does not, in fact, impact that slope. One of the problems with these trees on this hill is because of the rocky terrain, a lot of these trees are considered poor quality, and we would not see a profit from a removal of those trees. And in fact, we're assuming that we would have to remove those trees at a cost. The terrain also limits road building in that area just because of the rocky bluffs up there. As well, the tower and beacon that are located up there would have to be replaced, and making it a shorter, a lower tower, and still be visible. Happy lights on the runway would have to be repositioned, paint markings eradicated and relocated, and but the big thing is the vegetation management. There's a number of private properties in that area that we would have to obtain agreements with to maintain that vegetation. So even if we were able to do that and provide a 200 to 300 foot clearway, Pacific Coastal could see a benefit for at least their Saab aircraft of an additional 2 to 4 passengers. But remember that this takeoff happens approximately 50% of the time, depending on prevailing winds. So what staff are recommending is that we take no further action to establish a clearway, as the cost to establish this would be significant, and ongoing maintenance would also add significant cost to our operations for little benefit. So I'll leave it to you to ask any questions to me and go from there.
Councillor Pong, would you like to start?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will start with just a point of clarification, Mr. Bertig. I just want to clear in my mind, without proceeding down this road and holding the course as we are presently without any changes, the Saab would be not available to land in Powell River at any time, even dependent on weather, is because of the designation of our airport. Is that correct?
That is not correct. The Saab actually does land and take off at our airport at this time. What this does, the lack of clearway though, limits the capacity that they can have on the aircraft. So, but the Saab is able to utilize our airport at this time.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And a good report. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott, any questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Through the chair to Mr. Bertig. Would Powell River be able to have some kind of strategy where we have the project on the shelf and apply for grants to try to further it and not have it in the budget, but try to develop it into a better shovel-ready plan in case grants and funding could be found. I know a lot of grant programs, when they come out, if you're not ready to apply for them, you can't apply because you don't have enough information to do so. And sometimes the federal or provincial governments come out with programs that have deadlines that might fit maybe further feasibility or creating, furthering this project along. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yes, through the chair. Yes, definitely we could be shelf ready, but to be shelf ready comes at a cost. We estimate the LIDAR survey and the analysis could be and some ground proofing could be in the realm of up to $50,000, and anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 to establish that, just to be shelf ready. At this point, we have not seen any grants that that would cover this type of cost.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Alameda.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Berteg, I guess I happen to conveniently have visited some family on the weekend that live on Paget under the pole line, and so we had a chance to actually see several planes come in. And I am pretty sure it was getting dark by the time I recognized this one, but I'm pretty sure the larger one that I saw was a Pacific Coastal plane. So coming in from, I guess would be called the east and not from the water side. Based on your comments today, I'm guessing that would have been the beach plane that you said, because the Saabs can't make that pass in its current condition. Is that correct?
Through the chair, it could have been the Saab, because on approach, the Clearway does not come into effect. It's on takeoff, so it could have been either the 1900 or the Saab. It's the limits come into effect when the Saab has to take off towards the east.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. No other questions right now, Chair. Thank you.
Councilor Southcott. No. Councilor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One about a prospective motion. I'm wondering, through the chair to Mr. Bertig, if kind of a comma was added to the motion that said something like, unless grant funding became available for survey and design work, would that leave a door open if grants became available for funding specifically for that survey and design work, those upfront costs that would need to be spent, but you are not recommending we spend right now? Would that work in terms of what Councillor Elliott was wondering about?
Through the chair, that is an option that is available, and we could continue to seek out grants. At this time, we have not seen an opportunity. Yeah. Okay, so that's why we're recommending not to go further.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, at the beginning of this whole process, was the intention, because I wasn't on council when the initial project was approved, was the intention at the beginning for the Saab to be able to land at its full payload or full capacity, and it was just in June of this year that we realized that it wouldn't be possible? Is that kind of the order? Was that the intent in the beginning, and that June date of this year was when we found out that it wouldn't quite work? Yeah.
Through the chair, the intent of this project was to get as much runway length as possible, and unfortunately, we were stymied when we hit the roadblock of having runway over the existing landfill at the east end, and the geotechnical report that came back was very limiting, where they stated that we should not place any material over top of the landfill due to the potential of catastrophic failure. So we extended the runway as far as we could, and meeting TP 312 5th edition, AGN 3A with the safety areas that are now required with the new regulations. So we were hopeful that we could increase the capacity of the SOB, but it wasn't stated that we planned on having the SOB operate at full capacity all the time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else have any more questions? Councillor Palm.
Thank you to the chair. Mr. Bertig, I'm sure our carrier Pacific Coastal is disappointed in the final version of this report, but are they fully aware of the intent of this report?
Through the chair, yes, yeah, Pacific Coastal, obviously they are disappointed, but they do understand, what our recommendation is, and actually they thank staff for the investigation into establishing a Clearway. But yes, they would be disappointed.
Thank you for your work. Thank you.
Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bertig, you had mentioned just a minute ago to Councillor Isaacson's question regarding the extension that didn't go through because of the old landfill area there. So the thought crossed my head, I guess, had we been able to actually expand on that area that we're not expanding on, the old landfill area, wouldn't that have created a slightly bigger problem here in terms of needing more space or area for takeoff clearance in this particular conversation that we're having now?
Through the chair, yes, if we were able to extend the runway over the landfill, in fact, we would have still been in the same place and not been able to establish a Clearway of any manageable length.
Thank you.
Questions, so it'd be time for a motion if someone wants to make it. Councillor Alameda.
I move that council direct staff to take no further action as it relates to establishing a Clearway for runway 09 at Powell River Airport YPW and maintain the current AGN 3A runway classification.
Seconder. Councillor Palm. Any discussion? Councillor Elliott.
I'd like to move the amendment that Councillor Isaacson suggested when she last spoke, which was unless at the end of this motion, unless a funding becomes, or a grant becomes available to do the additional. Thank you, Mallory. Go. Sorry.
Through the chair, that would be a budget amendment. So just to advise, and perhaps we'll need a little bit of help crafting that, but the budget amendment would be to include this project as fully externally grant funded, should we get grant funding. And you would see this project in your special projects year over year being externally grant funded. And it would just continue to roll forward should council wish. And if a grant came forward, staff could act on the grant quickly. The alternative is it's not in the budget. Staff see a grant, we bring forward a request for a budget amendment and put it in at that point and then apply for the grant. So just nuances there, two options. But to your point, sometimes these grant deadlines are quick, and if it's in the budget, we're able to submit it without a budget amendment or a request to council. So those are the two approaches, and we would, if we could reference the budget, the 2024 financial plan bylaw 2742 in the recommendation, that would be helpful for staff.
So could I ask your help for some wording that would work for you in this amendment that I'm trying to propose?
Yes, through the chair. Ms. Walls, do we have the ability to put the recommendation on the screen? Wonderful.
And I don't know if it was construction. It was that 30 to 50 to.
The survey and design work.
Before we get too far into debating the motion, were you, CFO, were you proposing wording?
Through the chair, I would propose specific wording through the chair to Ms. Walls that references adding a $50,000 special project to the 2024 5-year financial plan bylaw 2742. Through the chair, bylaw 2742.
Does that do it?
Through the chair, I might add additional external grant funding. Should additional external project grant funding. Through the chair, that looks great, Ms. Walls, and thank you for that. I'm assuming here we would put this in the year 2024. Approve amendment to the 2024 5-year financial plan bylaw 2742, 2024 for the year 2024. And then we would just carry that forward. Through the chair, I think that's comprehensive and clear, and I appreciate you allowing us to have input.
Amendment I was trying to put forward.
You're done wording your amendment, Councillor Elliott. I'll just ask and see if there's a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Isaacson. Okay. Councillor Elliott, do you want to explain why you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, I think maybe no grant funding will ever become available for that, but if it should become available for that and we can get that study to make that shovel ready, it could move our community's airport forward to one that might help us in the future to carry more cargo or people in and out of our airport. And it doesn't seem to cost us much to keep it there on the books in case that does become available. And so I would appreciate having it there. Thanks.
Councillor Alameda.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. CFO, just for clarification for the community and then a comment maybe afterwards. So since there's a dollar amount on here and you mentioned this going in the budget, and I know members of our community look at that budget very carefully, you mentioned that this will go under the project grant funding, so obviously it won't have any impact on tax base or increase or anything else like that. Am I correct in that assumption?
Through the chair, that's fully correct. It would not impact taxes because it would be an external project grant that we would only receive for this project and would not be able to use on other projects that could be tax funded. So you are correct.
Perfect. So my only comment, I guess, because I know with the litany of things that we have in our budget and the different line items and the amount of information that us as councillors have to retain, I can see 12 months from now this topic coming up for conversation because some or all of us have forgotten this conversation from today. So my only request, should this go through, that we somehow can label this or asterisk this on a budget so that we can remember, oh yeah, this was just to the side for, and maybe you already have that in the current budget and I've missed them in the past, would be my only comment if this goes through.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else on the motion? I'm going to chime in on this amendment here because I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think we should be planning to spend money on something that I've been convinced by our staff not a good idea. My recollection of the establishment, the lengthening of the runway and the fixing of the pavement and the additional lighting was to make it possible to have larger aircraft land at the airport on a more reliable basis. Never particularly liked the idea of trying to make the airport fit one particular type of airplane, because that becomes totally redundant as soon as the airline that's operating that airplane decides to go to a different airplane. All of a sudden, it can be impossible to land the airplane that the carrier tries to use. Okay, we had a plan that was going to extend and add additional capacity and use more aircraft on the length of the runway. Spent the money on designing the runway and found out that if we're going to use it even more effectively for the existing aircraft, we would have to have a clearway. Mr. Bertig has told us that even if we come up with the money and do the study and cut the trees down, it's not necessary that that's going to make a lot of difference in the ability of the airplane to take off. So having said all that, I don't think that we need to put complicated language in about when we're going to plan to do something if other things happen that look good at the time. So I think we're better off without the amendment, but it's not really the end of the world if it goes through, because it doesn't mean much. Councillor Pond, did you want to say something?
Yes, to the chair, I agree with your comments, Councillor Doubt. I don't see at this time a need for this type of language, considering the recommendation from staff. There is additional cost. That's $50,000. If we were to get that grant funding, we'd simply put a shovel-ready book on a shelf somewhere for the cost down the road. So considering our current financial situation, I would suggest we stick with the original motion. Thank you.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I threw out the idea of this amendment in earlier conversation, and I've been thinking about it since then. And I think for me, the question is, were this study, survey, and design work be done, we would then need to decide whether to go through with the changes. And the changes and the ongoing work needed to keep it clear, I think, are extensive and support our community broadly with a bit of additional payload. But I also wonder, might it be considered about a direct support to business? Because as mentioned in the report, the deployment of an air carrier's fleet is a private business matter. So I've kind of gone back and forth on this, and I don't, the amount of cutting and clearance and moving and the ongoing maintenance work that would have to be done for something that is quite hypothetical, I'm not interested in supporting at this time, because to support this motion, I think is only worthwhile if I would be considering wanting to support the work that would be carried out after the design and survey work, and I don't think I am at this time. So I'm going to not support this amendment.
Councillor Southcott. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I understood what Mr. Bertig a little tiny bit differently than you did. I heard him to say that a clearway is possible. And in order to be sure, we needed to do this further investigation because there were some questions that they had. The further investigations would be part of the $30,000 to $50,000 study. And at the end of that study, there was some potential that it may not be possible, but their preliminary assessment was that it was possible, but it had all of these contingencies. It isn't a classification that affects only one airplane or one carrier or what have you. It's a classification for the airport overall for any carrier that goes there, and how much cargo and what kinds of things they can move in and out of the airport. So whether it's Pacific Coastal or any other airport, it's a community asset that improves our ability to have a carrier come in and move people and or cargo that weigh more than what the current classification is. And there's some directional things. If you can take off that way and the wind's good, then you have a better classification than if you're going in the other direction. And so that makes things a little bit uncertain at this point in time for any carrier that works at our airport, because they can't predict wind speed ahead of time when they're scheduling their aircrafts. So on the safe side, they schedule less all the time, even though sometimes they might be able to take off the other way and carry more. So it provides restrictions at our airport that may not exist at other community airports. I'm not suggesting we spend money foolishly, and I'm not suggesting we raise taxes. I'm suggesting that we leave in our plan the idea that we could apply for a grant for this $30,000 to $50,000 so that we could get those additional questions answered. And once answered, if it's clear that it is viable and worth doing, we may be able to then find further grants to expand our airport. If we take it off the books, we have no way of ever increasing the capacity of our local airport. And so I'm against leaving it that way. Thanks.
Those in favor of the amendment that's on the screen? Opposed? Amendment is defeated. That brings us back to the main motion without the amendment. All those in favor of the motion? The opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you for all that work, Mr. Bertig. It's a lot. I had a really good look at those maps.
Thank you.
Next item is 7.3, the procedure bylaw. I'll refer to the CAO. I'd like to make some comments on what we have in front of us.
Through the chair, I'd like to invite Ms. Walls to comment on this report before opening the floor to discussions. Thank you so much, Ms. Walls.
Ms. Wall.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So the much awaited procedure bylaw is here for your review. Just to summarize the different attachments, because I know there's a lot here. Attachment 2 was the version drafted after several workshop sessions with Ms. Bylaws, as well as the committee of the whole meeting, where the committee voted on quite a number of changes to many of the sections. So once staff compiled those changes into that version, again, attachment 2, that's the version that was sent to legal for the review. So as requested, attachment 3 compares the current bylaw with that draft as per the committee's request. Given that they were two quite different documents, we did our best to list the changes in as much of an understandable format as we could. And then attachment 4 is the version legally reviewed. So the first page summarizes the major changes that legal made or suggested. It's not identical to the draft we submitted because there were quite a number of minor changes, like things to eliminate redundancies, improve flow, take out some duplications, or expand or condense certain sections, and to clarify language. So in order to try to maintain simplicity, I didn't go into full detail on those minor changes. I made sure that anything really changing the intent or the meaning of the bylaw was included in the summary on that first page. And then just one more note from the last time the procedure bylaw came to this group, there was some concern from the public and members of council about the legalities around public engagement and limiting speaking time and the number of speakers and that sort of content. But as you can see from this version, legal didn't flag any concerns of this nature. And they did say on multiple times throughout this process that it is the role of council through their procedure bylaw to maintain control and order in the meetings. And they can use the procedure bylaw to help do this. And that's the standard across the board throughout municipalities. So that's the long and short of it there. At this stage, staff are seeking direction as to which version to proceed with, if any, along with any amendments council may wish to make. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I'm going to do the same thing we've done before. I imagine we've got lots and lots of questions to ask. So I'm going to start with Councillor Isaacson and go around this other way for a change trying to mix things up.
I thought you might do that. So I have, first of all, thank you for all of your work on this, Deputy Corporate Officer Laporte or Walls. I know the latest version post legal review I found to be quite clear, and but I have a number of questions that I'll start with two. So I'm looking at the legal review version, and I'm looking at item 38. Which is, where are we at here? Resolutions. So part 8 resolutions, copies of resolutions to council members. So this is again, section 38 of attachment 4, the legal review version. I'm wondering if you could help explain, this is a resolution pertaining to an agenda item may be introduced at a council meeting or committee of the whole only if a copy of it has been delivered to each member at least 24 hours before the meeting, or if we all agree to waive it. And so, you know, we have used notices of motion, and sometimes people hand things out at the meeting. I'm wondering if there was an intention of the method through which we would deliver it to each member, and how would that work? For example, when we had our remuneration conversation last week, or if people are bringing potential budget amendments forward next week, is the intention for those types of resolutions to be shared with all of members 24 hours in advance? Because sometimes motions come up in the moment, but sometimes we're prepared in advance. So I'm just wondering about the logistics of this, or the intended logistics of this.
Through the chair, yeah, I think I remember back to one of our first sessions here. I think the intention with this one is to, you know, for one, instead of crafting motions on the fly, having that work done in advance, so that not only staff could perhaps, you know, help draft it as we do in the meeting, but also give council a chance to see those in advance to help make those decisions. As you mentioned, that sometimes that happens on the fly based on, you know, information. Let's say like today, you know, Mr. Ringma made a presentation, so you might want to make a motion based on something he said that wasn't in the report to begin with. So having that piece where members can agree to waive the requirement, I think it's trying to push having that stuff in advance, so that everyone can consider it with notice.
So just to clarify through the chair, say for example, this procedure bylaw was in effect and we're heading into a meeting next week where the budget is on the agenda, and we referred that item, giving us a chance to look and bring our, you know, amendments forward. And so the idea behind this is that if we had a number of amendments that we were going to propose at that council meeting, that we would send it perhaps by email to council members as an FYI 24 hours in advance. And that person may choose to include those or not or move those or not as amendments in the discussion, but the intention would be for us to see them in advance so that we're not having to respond to them on the fly. Is that so that would change things a little bit, or at least add a little bit more structure to how we operate. Do I have that correct?
That would be the idea. That's right.
Okay, thank you. So that was my first question. Let's say my second question, section 36, so a little bit above, which is the adjournment of council meetings. And the same item is true for committee of the whole meetings. I didn't understand item 2. A motion to adjourn either a council meeting or the debate at a council meeting is always in order if that motion has not been preceded at that meeting by the same motion. Could you explain that to me? Through the chair.
I think that means you can't make a motion to adjourn twice. If
Through
it's,
the chair. That's right. If it was, well, no, that I think the idea is not to, it's always in order. Oh, that's funny. I understood it as something else before, but now that I'm rereading it, yeah, I can certainly look into that wording as to why it was worded that way.
Yeah, because if a motion to adjourn has already been given at that meeting, then yeah,
The only way this could happen, Councillor Isaacson, is if someone makes a motion and the motion to adjourn is defeated, then somebody subsequently makes the motion to adjourn immediately again.
Oh, proceeded.
Okay, so the idea is you can move a motion to adjourn. It either passes or it's defeated. You either adjourn or you don't. If you don't adjourn, you go on to the next item of business.
So, Chair, that means that in a meeting, if someone makes a motion to adjourn before the business is over and it's defeated, then a motion to adjourn cannot be made at any point in that same meeting until the business is over?
That's not what it says. It says unless unless it's being preceded at that meeting by the same motion. So yeah, I guess that means the same thing. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like proceeded immediately or proceeded at any time.
At any time.
Yeah, if it was defeated before, you can never adjourn again.
You know, that's what it says. Everybody can change it if they want. We're in questions right now, so I think that answers your question. We will come back to you because everybody else will have lots of questions too.
I'm done my first two. Thank you.
Councillor Southcott.
Kind of mixed up my numbering here, so I'm gonna have to pass for now.
Okay. Councillor Alameda.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Walls, just a question on process. Since the recommendation is to put it forth to council next Thursday, which I believe I hear the mayor is hoping to attend. I believe we are doing the first readings at that council meeting. So I was just curious because this is a hardy document with a lot of individual lines that are going to be scrutinized by council and the community. Is there still capacity between now and Thursday should committee hear, or I guess for special council now, if special council between now and next Thursday's council meeting sees some areas of improvement before first three readings, does making an amendment next Thursday make it that much more challenging to do those readings? Should the mayor or someone else have any adjustments that they want to make?
Through the chair, great question. So there's a few options here. So of course, amendments can be made today. So any amendments that would be made today, if council refers this to the next meeting for readings, I would incorporate those amendments into the draft bylaw. What council could do is just give the bylaw the first two readings at the next council meeting, and that space between second and third reading gives more opportunity for review, for amendments. So once it's given third reading, the idea is no more amendments are made between third reading and adoption. So if more amendments would be made wanted to be made after third reading, you would need to rescind third reading to go back to second and make more amendments. So you could just do the first two readings at the next meeting, give more opportunity for review and amendments. At the next meeting would be third reading, and then notice would go out to consider adoption, which would happen at, again, a following meeting. So if council feels confident in the draft next council meeting, you can give the 3 readings. You could also allow longer space until adoption to allow more review, because that notice does go out. So there's a couple of ways that council can go about that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna try to encapsulate. all of the different things that the corporate officer said might happen. Okay. You can make amendments today if you want to, if you've had time to study it, or you can wait until next meeting on the 19th when we do however many readings council chooses to do. Council can choose to do first, second, and third readings on the 19th. Council can choose to do no readings of the bylaws on the 19th, or council can choose to do one reading of the bylaw on the 19th. That's all up to council's decision, but what will have to happen is council will have to decide what they want to do. So, I hope that's clear. You can make amendments tonight. You can still make amendments for sure on the 19th, and we can do one or more readings of the bylaw on the 19th, or we can choose not to.
I'm good, thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So my first question for clarity is the legal recommendations that are listed, are they reflected and passed by within the document that's attached to them? So for example, are there recommendations where they've made a recommendation that hasn't been actually physically done within the draft?
Through the chair, no, they're all there. So I think I can, for example, switch over to that one here. So
Item 10, expansion on provision of electronic participation, it's expanded to what they think it should be?
Yes, so electronic participation was only one section, so it's now sections 9 and 10, and then numbers were bumped subsequently. So things like that. So those are the expansions they made. Those are the changes they made. There wasn't anything they suggested that wasn't put in here that I've mentioned in the summary there.
So the version attached to the one label, attachment 4 legal review, is the version that has passed legal review?
Correct. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to follow up on the comments or questions by Councillor Ezekson around resolutions. Since this is a procedure bylaw, it would then restrict council's ability to create resolutions and/or amendments if it was required to be submitted in advance. Because I think best practices are absolutely just to put things in advance. But as we learn from one another and have open minds in our discussion and try to reach consensus, our ability to do that would be restricted if we could not propose resolutions that meet what each other is saying within a meeting. And I'm curious about whether that section around resolutions was intended to so restrict council's ability to make motions without having them put forward 24 hours in advance. Because if so, I'm really reluctant to do that. It restricts the ability of council to come to consensus within a meeting.
Through the chair, there is that provision at the end of 38 subsection 1 that says all members present can unanimously agree to waive that requirement. So, a formal vote wouldn't need to necessarily happen unless somebody was very opposed to it. But for example, the amendment that was made today to the last motion, the chair could, as you've done before, everyone around the table okay with this motion being made on the fly? Everybody nods, yep, okay. By unanimous consent, the motion was permitted without notice. So
okay,
there is that mechanism for sure.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Corporate Officer Wells. That makes sense. So we can, this is the procedure unless the council present or the people present at time say otherwise.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Palm, any questions about any of this?
Thank you, through the chair. Appreciate it, Councillor Doubt. First of all, I am going to state that I have been contacted by the mayor, who obviously is not in the chamber today because of his medical situation. And he has asked me via email on Sunday to ask for deferment of this item until he can be here physically to take part. And that would be sometime probably in January. So I'm just prefacing my comments on his request. And I think that's something that council should entertain because for the number of reasons. One, this is the most important bylaw that we have. It relates to how we do business. It relates to public engagement and a whole host of important items that council needs to consider when we're conducting business. So for that point alone, I am going to make a motion to ask for deferment. And there are another number of other reasons. One, the haste that this has been brought forward, I haven't been able to wrap my head around.
Councillor Palm, do you want to make a motion before you speak to it?
Yeah, okay, I'll make the motion. I'll move that we defer comments on the procedure bylaw until December 19th and move this, what we're doing here today, forward to December 19th council meeting for discussion, comment, since we'll have more time. And also, yeah, that's all I need to do. Move this for discussion to the December 19th meeting. And hopefully through that motion, the mayor will have time in the new year to join us for further discussion.
Well, is there a seconder for that motion?
Question?
No, you can't ask a question. Councillor Palm's made a motion. Can either second it, and Councillor Isaacson has seconded it. So, Councillor Palm, you get to speak first.
So, the mayor, who is our leader, has asked for this pointedly. I agree with his request. Secondly, the importance of this bylaw needs time. Thirdly, the public has also written emails expressing their concern about the timelines and their lack of opportunity to review the document thoroughly before we comment further, especially in light that if we were to make 3 motions on December 19th or 3 readings, that they wouldn't even have had the opportunity to be a delegation at that meeting on the subject because they've already missed the deadline. Also, the time of year, it's a busy time of year. Public's busy, we're busy. And for those reasons, I believe the mayor needs to join us on this discussion in the new year. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. What I wanted to ask was, is your intention to shut down questions so that we can better understand the document today, or just to defer any motions about it?
That's a good question.
The motion is what the motion says.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether isn't because right now we were just in question period.
I think my motion asked for deferment of today's proceeding.
Okay, so you want to shut down the conversation? Okay, thanks.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. I personally would like to proceed with questions and answers so that I know what sort of amendments I'd like to propose. From what I remember, I believe I heard from our Deputy Corporate Officer and yourself, Chair, it may be possible at the next meeting on the 19th to just do the first 2 readings, because I do agree that it's important for us as council members and for members of the public to take a look at this and provide us feedback and prepare for amendments. And I do think there's room actually to continue with questions today. And, you know, I have some amendments that I can hold and leave them till next week so that we're not voting on them today, that we could propose amendments with ideally full council present, although we can never guarantee that. And and provide everybody a little bit more time. So I don't support the motion to defer right now because I want to continue with Q&A, but I would support an alteration to the recommendation from staff, which is to only do 2 readings next week, so that there's further time for amendments and we don't have to rescind anything. So that's where I stand right now. Thank you.
Got my name on the list next. So this is not a surprise bylaw that nobody's ever seen before. It didn't just come out of the sky on Friday afternoon. I just brought my file. The top document on the file that I have is dated December 5th, 2023, Procedure Bylaw Review, which came out of our strategic planning in the spring of 2023 when we were getting ready for a 4-year term as a council, where everybody, including the mayor, had proposed changes to the procedure bylaw that everybody looked at that time as changes of a minor nature. And as we went through to the end of December 2023, I don't think there was a majority of members on council who had actually read the whole procedure bylaw. But we did have the bylaw come to a public meeting on December 5th, 2023. We subsequently had more council workshops that everybody attended. Some of them were closed meetings, some of them were public meetings. Towards the end of July, we finally had what looked like something close to a final document. And then we brought that forward to council after several deferments and several going back to more workshops. We came to council. And in July, I think July was the right date, we passed quite a number of amendment motions to the draft procedure bylaw. And one of them was to get legal advice on it, to make sure that we were not contravening the Charter of Rights and Freedoms of Canada by limiting people's speech. And that's part of the legal discussion. We've got that back now. 5 days more than a year after the first time it was in the public. And the public has had lots of opportunities to comment on it. Everybody's had plenty of opportunities to see it. And now we have a document which I think would be worth talking about. So I'm not in favor of postponing it. I think it's important that the mayor participate. And I'm sure he gets the copies of the agenda. I'm sure he's had an opportunity to read the procedure bylaw and prepare for next week. But it's certainly not going to be finalized today. It's not going to be finalized on the 19th. Maybe on the 19th, we might give it 1 reading or 2 readings. Then it will come back to a future council meeting after that for even more input. Lots of opportunity for the public to chime in. And the more we discuss it tonight, the more people will have to actually understand what the procedure bylaw is about. The number of expansions of the opportunities of members of the public to speak to council is something that people are writing to me about. And there seems to be a lack of understanding about the expanded citizen opportunities to speak to council. And I'd like to actually spend time exploring and discussing those things. So I'm not in favor of deferring it. You know, maybe we just want to decide at some point to go with the good old thing we had in 2015, which was the last time we looked at the procedure bylaw, and see if we can get on with other business. But I'm not in favor of postponing this. I think we should take our time to actually look at what the contents are and see if we want to make changes. So, Councillor Southcott, you're a first-time speaker. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what's been said. I don't think we need to postpone as such because I don't think any of us are satisfied with moving this forward particularly quickly, and we can work on it next week as well. And that doesn't will result in us still seeing it again in the new year. And if it goes the way it seems that we are inclined to go, we're going to probably see it twice in the new year before we even pass it. So I think Councillor Palm's intentions and respect of the mayor being involved in this conversation are easily looked after by simply allowing the process that we're involved in here to proceed. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott. And Councillor Isaacson, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to continue with Q&A, so I'm not in favor of this particular motion. I have all kinds of sympathy for making different motions when we get to the recommendations that might restrict us to one reading or some such thing on the 19th, because I'm perfectly happy to delay decision making into the new year to accommodate the mayor in that regard. But any conversation and Q's and A's we can have here today to further our understanding of the document before us helps not only everybody involved, the mayor included, can listen to the answers to those questions and gain better understanding of what the document means and how it gets implemented as worded currently. And so I think that exploration and conversation is going to further everybody's understanding, and I'd like to continue with that.
Councillor Palm.
Thank you, the Chair. First of all, I just want to state that the mayor has asked for this item to be deferred. Simply the messenger of his ask. So a lot of the comments seem to be directed at me in regards to this motion for deferment, but I don't have any problem with, you can discuss whatever you want today, but if we move this forward for first reading to December 19th, that will allow me to have more time to look at it. I'm sure will allow the mayor more time if he's able to look at it. And maybe he can pipe in and say a few words in that regard. But my biggest concern is the mayor is not involved. The more discussion we have today, he's not on the screen, and I know he's not involved at all. So that's my concern. And I am hoping he can tune in on the 19th to hear your various concerns and comments so that he's fully prepared in the new year to come fully informed on this topic. Because as you stated, Councillor Dowd, this has a lot of ramifications for the public in terms of engagement. And I have not heard anybody even comment in that regard yet. So, you know, this is a very important bylaw, and the public wants to have time to be engaged, and they want to have time to be heard. That's the point I'm trying to make by deferring and not getting into a great deal of comment today without the mayor here, so that we're all on the same page when this comes to be voted on with not just the first reading, but the second, third, and final reading. Thank you, Councillor Dowd.
Councillor Alameda.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the question I asked the corporate officer at the beginning of this conversation, you know, if it came down to it where the motion as it's in the recommendation today meant that we were absolutely doing the first 3 readings next week, then I would be maybe more inclined to defer. But since we know that we can do 0, 1, 2, or 3 readings next Thursday, and there's opportunities within those first and second readings to still do amendments, I can appreciate that the mayor does want to be in attendance, and where we can accommodate, that'd be great. I think we can do both. I think we can, if there's some amendments here that 4 or 5 councillors are going to agree with, that's probably not going to change between now and Thursday, or next week rather. And we're moving our document further along. As it is right now, we might only get to approving this final document in February or March next year, because that's just the time it'll take. Maybe it'll even take a little longer with other items that come up on the agenda. So I think we're here now. We scheduled a special meeting for the purpose of discussing this, and we have very little left on the agenda today. So I'd rather take the time to discuss it a little bit more, and maybe we'll discuss it again. Maybe we do no readings next week at all, and I'd be perfectly fine with that, but we're still slowly moving it along and such. Thank you.
We're discussing Councillor Palm's amendment, so you understand what we're looking at.
It's just a motion, it's not an amendment.
We maybe see the motion on the screen. And the motion is then, Councillor Palm, that council defer discussion on the procedure bylaw till December 19th. All those in favor of the motion? Those opposed? Motion is defeated with Councillor Palm in favor. Well, I've got a couple of questions to ask. So, Ms. Wall, could you explain for me the changes to the changes in the newly added section 23 public clarification? Can you explain how that works in the bylaw and what impact that has on the public?
Through the chair, the section on the recess, is that correct?
Section 23, public clarification and how it applies to the agenda. The agenda is later on in the sections. Section 23 is public clarification, and the agenda itself is
It's 22 in mine, but
Oh, I see. So, sorry, I think we're looking at the two different versions, but that's okay. Either way. So the public clarification would be an item agenda where similar to question period, where members of the public could ask questions. This would be different than the public input period, where members of the public could provide comment. So having those two opportunities for the public to engage. Were there specific questions about process that you were wondering, Council?
So there, maybe I can phrase it a different way. There's three opportunities in the proposed bylaw for the public to be involved. One is delegations, which is slightly changed from previous ones. The other one is public clarification, which used to be the question period. And then there's public input, which gives people the opportunity in three different places in the agenda to provide input to decisions council is making at that meeting. I was wondering if you could explain those changes to the people that are listening, paying attention.
Certainly, Chair. So the idea is to, like you said, give members of the public different opportunities. We also noticed that there's sometimes a struggle. Folks want to make comment at question period, but that time is meant specifically for questions. So it can be a challenge chairing that, and people then have to try to, on the fly, who are familiar with council procedure, make a question on the spot out of them just wanting to make a comment. So having those two separate opportunities, and then a third, as you mentioned, delegations to present some matter to council that's been prepared in advance, not necessarily specific to an agenda item. But then with these three components, ensuring that there's some limitations to keep the meeting on track, keep order in the meeting. yeah, I think, does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? We'll go back to Councillor Isaacson, who started us up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Next question is related to the items just discussed. Again, I'm in the attachment 4 legal review version. Under section 18 is public input period. And so there were some legal review suggestions to limit to 3, but that council could, if by unanimous vote, extend it beyond 3. I'm wondering, within here, there isn't a described procedure with how people would be, which 3 people or more, even if council decides to do more than 3, how they'd be chosen or how they sign up. So, so that might exist in a different document. There may be a policy around it, but I think it would be helpful. I want to understand in terms of fairness and equity, how people would be able to access the public input period if they're calling in and joining online or in person. Do they need to sign up? And so what would the procedure look like? And so that way I'll know if I want to propose any amendments, because I'm thinking about, yeah, fairness and equity in how people are able to sign up or able to be part of the public input period. So was there an intention to have a procedure around this?
Through the chair, we considered a sign-up process in advance that ends up looking a lot more like delegations. And what sometimes happens is, again, just like council, things come up during the meeting and, oh, I heard that. Oh, I have a question about that or want to make a comment on that. So having it essentially as it is now, first come, first serve. I think ad hoc, if we know something is going to be a very popular item for the public, to, you know, and we start getting a lot of requests to speak to council, we could maybe have something ready in advance for those circumstances. This was the idea behind not putting a specific process in place, and folks in the gallery come up, and if it hasn't been a 6-hour meeting and council's willing, you can allow more than 3. So that was our rationale there.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, there will be some sort of procedure, and it will be something that maybe we adjust as we go based on learnings. But the intention is maybe that there'd be a sign up. But no, there wouldn't be a sign up. But if there's something a hot topic, we might implement some other procedure. So it's kind of it leaves it open to trying things out, I guess, is the intention.
Through the chair, I think so. It is always a work in progress. So the bylaw can always be amended. We can also add a policy if we start to see that something's needed or there is a gap there. So it does leave it open for us now to start to see how it goes. As we know things as they get put into practice, we learn. So like you said, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll do a second question for this round. I'm in the same document, part 33, motion for the main motion. So 33 item 2 says a motion to amend the main motion may not be amended. So does that mean there's no amendment to the amendment? And similarly, item 1 says only one amendment to the main motion is permitted. Does that mean at a time? We have sometimes amended a main motion twice once the first motion to amend has been approved and brought back into the main motion. So if I could just get a little bit more clarity on section 33, thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Great question, Councillor. Yes, it was at a time. We start to get, as we did a little bit last week, into that the amendment. I think early on in the term, we had amendments to amendments to amendments. And I think this just makes it a little easier to, we'll deal with one amendment, vote on that main motion. If we need a further amendment, deal on that then, you know, deal with the amendments one at a time. What I'm finding is we kind of shift to having the motions available on the screen, is that we can sort out those motions a little more in advance, so we don't have as many amendments. I think this is just, I know that this is just for ease of procedure.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand through the chair, the intention is for item 1 to be only one amendment to the main motion is permitted at a time. So we're not looking at, yeah. But 2, the intention is to not be able to allow amendments to amendments. That's correct? That's what
Correct.
The intention of 2? Okay.
Correct, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Southcott, any questions? Councillor Alameda.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't had as much time to dive into it as I would have liked, so I'm okay right now and can save some small things for next week when we have further discussion.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to be sure I am interpreting the electronic participation correctly. Electronic participation would mean by telephone or by the teams that we're currently using. It wouldn't preclude people from joining by phone, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay. Because we've been able to join by phone for quite a while. I was trying to make sure that that was not being eliminated. Thank you. I thought we were just going in circles, but I could ask more questions if you like me to. Oh, great. Thank you. So the part around resolutions, I'm back to that again. It kind of feels a little bit backwards to me. It seems to me that the committee should be able, I think, how would we go about if we wanted to change resolutions on the fly to be one that council could unanimously never mind. I'm not going to ask the question. Carry on. I'm going to think about it more. I'll ask next week.
Palm.
Yes, Sykes, through the chair, with all due respect to the mayor's request, I'll decline any further comments today on this item and wait till it comes forward, hopefully when he's in house. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm in the same attachment 4, the legal review version. In section 42, conduct and debate. Item C, it says a motion put forward during a committee of the whole meeting need not be seconded. That seems like new language to me, but I was, maybe I'm incorrect. Has that always been the case, or can you explain a little bit more about motions during committee of the wholes needing not be seconded?
Through the chair, that was, I think that was put in by Twyla at one of the sessions, and as process, from what I understand, as process goes at committee of the whole meeting, that it's just a little different than council. It's a little less formal, so maybe that was put in by, I remember somebody talking about it, and now I've had so many conversations about this bylaw. I don't remember who it was, but I think that's something more common in committee of the whole meetings.
Okay.
That wasn't a decision I made, so
Sure.
I can't speak largely to it. But.
Sure. And then I've got 2 questions remaining. One is section 37, part 3. Let's see here. 37, part 3. Oh, this speaks to bylaws and first readings and when things can be amended, etc. And so I don't know if we've been following this procedure previously. It talks about, so part 37, section 3, before adoption, a bylaw requires the following readings at a regular council meeting. So A, at first reading, the bylaw is only introduced and will not be debated. And B, the second reading, a bylaw is read by title only in case it resolves that it be read in whole or in part to consider the body of the bylaw. And then it says 3, the bylaw is debated then, it looks like. And so I'm wondering if you could just speak to, at the fourth reading, the bylaw will not be debated. And so this seems like a different way that we've been doing it, especially when we do have amendments or there is debate over a bylaw. And so can you just confirm for me whether this is different and how this, like, for example, this, if we had already adopted this procedure bylaw and we're carrying this through, it sounds like if we wanted to actually debate the bylaw next week, we would have to do 3 readings and then debate it. But when can amendments be made? If you could just speak about when amendments would be made in this process based on this current version.
Through the chair, I think it is worded a little bit funny. How I understand it is that at the time of second reading, and at the time of third reading, it may be debated. Once you're bringing it to adoption, there's no more debate. So if you were to further debate it, you would rescind third reading. In past, I don't think we've followed this to the T, but that's my understanding. But it doesn't really say like before or after the reading. So I can clarify that language a little bit more.
Yeah, the language that I'd be looking for is where might amendments be able to happen if we're moving through the process and the version that staff have brought forward is not the final version that council is interested in. Where would amendments happen? So I'd be looking for clarity on that. And then, Chair, I've got one final question, if you'll allow it.
Go for it.
So in section 43 and 44 is about committee of the whole to rise and report to council. Have we ever done that? Can you provide an example of when a committee of the whole would rise and report or rise and not report to council? Or how do we talk about this in our existing procedures?
Through the chair, so this has been funny to me as well. So this was brought up by Twyla and confirmed by legal that because what can be done, and I've never seen it happen in Powell River. Procedurally, it seems convoluted and complex. But what could happen is in a council meeting, you can move into, like during a council meeting, you can move into a committee of the whole meeting to have that informal debate and discussion should you wish. Once that's done, then you rise and report from committee of the whole to council. I have heard of the odd municipality doing that. I haven't ever seen it in practice, but this is something that is able to be done and recommended by folks paid much more than me to include in the procedure bylaw. So
yeah, I didn't know what a rise without reporting meant. So if anyone has seen that happen in other communities on council, I'd be curious to hear. I might do my own research before the next meeting just so I fully understand that. Those are all the questions for me. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else with any questions?
I researched that, and from what I could find, it's not in Robert's rules, the entire 1,200-page version. But from the best that I can determine, it simply means go back into council without, as would be done in a subsequent meeting, reporting on what came from the sectioned out committee of the whole meeting. I think it's just peculiar language that we haven't used before.
Yeah.
Through the chair.
I just want to try to help everybody out here. a little bit, is that in our 2015 procedure bylaw, there are distinct differences between procedures at committee of the whole meetings and council meetings. Council has never followed those procedures, but they're distinctly different. The council didn't follow them to the point that new councilors, including myself, had no clue about what the difference between a committee of the whole meeting was and a council meeting was. And that's explained in careful reading of the 2015 bylaw. But you know, there's committee of the whole meetings and committee of the whole meetings. Some organizations, some councils, in the middle of their meeting, their council meeting, will move to enter a committee of the whole, and then continue on under the rules of a committee of the whole, because they can have a more open and free discussion about things than they can within the rules of a council meeting. And then when they're done having that open and free discussion, would make a motion to rise and report and go back to the council meeting, which could be us saying, okay, we're done our nice heart-to-heart talk in public, and now we'll go back to a open public council meeting that has more restrictive rules, like how long you can speak and how many times you can speak and whether you can make a decision or not. You know, those all depend on your procedure bylaws and whether you choose to follow them or not. So it's not a simple question, and nobody in this room has seen that happen before, because unless they've looked at other council meetings where they do that in different councils. So where are we at the questions? We've been around the table a few times. Councillor Elliott, you're never out of questions.
Sorry, I don't mean to be. So I think I figured out this language around the adjournment, and it's a little bit similar to this language in the committee of the whole thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we've now got a thing at the end that says once the agenda has been executed, that the chair might declare the meeting adjourned at that point. If it hasn't been finished, it would and you wish to adjourn a meeting that hasn't finished the agenda, you would have to have a motion to do so. And a motion to do so can be entered by anybody in the meeting at any time, but only once. So if you try to end conversation by adjourning the meeting and it's defeated, you can't have anybody do that again until the end of the agenda. This is similar language, but it's saying only one person may only ask to end the meeting once, and then it has to be someone else the next time. It couldn't be the same person doing that if it's defeated. That's my read on some of this language. Did I get that right?
Through the chair, perhaps, but it doesn't. I think I'll still look to clarify the language, because it doesn't say that. So it does leave it up to quite a bit of interpretation. So, but that's a good point to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Southcott.
I'm starting to get my numbers reorganized here after having spent hours going through attachment 2, not attachment 4, like I should have. So this question is about section 19, subsection 11, refers to a separate cover to council. I'm just wondering, would that be in an email, or how would that be managed?
Sorry, through the chair, could you just repeat your question?
Yeah, maybe I'll read the whole subsection. The proposed delegation may appeal to the corporate officer's decision to council, and the information they provide in support of such appeal must be provided to the corporate officer and then distributed under separate cover to council for its consideration at a regular meeting. I'm presuming that would be to us by email or some other way. Is that the separate cover language is just I didn't really understand what that meant.
Through the chair, I believe that means to, like if there, let's say a member of the public is disputing my decision, I said, yeah, a separate email is sent to mayor and council to dispute. I understood it as without me, so I would get another staff member to send that to council as it's my decision they're disputing, so to speak. So that's how I understood it, but I can double check just to make sure I'm interpreting that correctly as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
See, they're on their hands up. So if he wants to make a motion, now might be a good time. Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question before I make my motion because it'll change how I make my motion. I've got 3 just housekeeping amendments that I don't think are really, they don't need debate. And so I'd like to include them in my motion. So if I say,
I would like you to make one motion at a time, Councillor Isaacson, please.
And so I'm asking for clarification on the best way to make that motion, Chair. So I'll move that the draft City of Powell River Procedure Bylaw 2756/2024 amended to include legal recommendations be referred to the December 19th, 2024 regular council meeting for the first 2 readings, and then comma, plus the following amendments. And so I'm going to email these amendments to staff right now, just so that they have the wording.
I'm going to beg you to make the amendments in separate motions for some clarity and I hope that we can get through the debate. So if you make the amendments that you want to make one at a time, and then you make the motion to refer, I think it would be easier to navigate.
Okay, so you're suggesting that I propose the amendment. So no one has seconded my motion. I'll retract what I just said. So then let me just look at the notes here. So I will then instead vote or move to amend sections 36. To amend section 41, part 1, part B, change 5 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. because I think that was actually a mistake.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Alameda. Can you explain your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So 41, part 1, section B talks about adjourning committee of the whole by 7 p.m. if called to order was scheduled at 5 p.m. And in the beginning of this document, committee of the whole was either supposed to start at 2 p.m. if it was closed or 3:30 p.m. if there were no closed items. So I think the 5 p.m. is incorrect, and it should just be updated to 3:30 p.m.
Councillor Alameda.
Thank you, Chair. I think no problem with this amendment, but I do have a question for our corporate officer that she and I had chatted a little offline just before the meeting, and a few councillors have realized there's a slight difference in attachment 2 and attachment 4, the legal review. Per my conversation with the corporate officer, it was because the electronic meeting section got a little wordy that they divided into two sections, but as a result, it threw off all the numbering for the subsequent sections. So before we get into amending things, I guess I wanted some clarity because Councillor Isaacson's amendment here applies to the section numbers as they are in the legal review,
Yes.
attachment 4, but that is different because in attachment 2, that same section is, I believe, 42. So if we can get clarity, I guess, which is the document that we're going to be putting forward to further discussion.
My intention was the legal review one, as that is the one that is recommended that we send to December 19th. So happy to provide that clarity.
Now everybody's hands going up because a lot of us have been working from 1 or 2 documents, and when you start going to 3 or 4 documents, you start to find inconsistencies, and that's going to make it really difficult in my mind to talk about section and paragraph numbers 41A, 41(1)B that might be different from the legal review to the draft bylaw. And I'm having difficulty with that myself. But, Councillor Elliott.
I'm not entirely sure what the intention is around. I know we currently start our meetings at 3:30, so I agree that 5 is odd. I don't know why we would do 5:30 if it was at 2 and 7 if it was at 3:30. If 2 was intended to do an in-camera section, maybe that it applies to the in-camera portion of the meeting. So the entire section is a little unclear to me, and so I'm not really prepared to vote on the amendment yet. I'd rather make sure the section matches the timing that we're trying to do for this, and I don't fully understand it. So that's where I'm at.
Councillor Palm, I saw your hand up.
Yes, through the chair, I concur with Councillor Elliott that the more changes we make at this time with various versions of this out there for the public, the more confusing it gets for everyone. So I would not make any amendments other than trying to stick close to what we already have in terms of a recommendation. And we define whether it's first, second, or third readings proposed for the 19th.
What else?
Just as a note of observation, I also picked up this 5 p.m., only it was 5:30 on the attachment 2, which wasn't consistent with the other information in that article or a subsection in that attachment, but it made more sense why it didn't work in that attachment than it did in attachment 4 to me. So I just wanted to note that. I think 5 is it's a typo that carried through from 2 to 4.
I'm going to put my oar in the water here. I'm going to suggest what I would like to do is defeat the amendment. It's been moved and seconded. I'd like to simply defeat that amendment and go ahead to the motion, which was to defer this until December 19th. I think if we just keep it simple and defer this concept to December 19th, we'll be able to have a clear picture about what we're doing. We'll be able to all talk about the same document, and we'll be able to do it with the mayor present, hopefully. But one way or another, nothing will actually happen to the bylaw until sometime in January or February. That's what I would do. I would defeat this amendment and pass a motion to defer until December 19th. Simple. Councillor Elliott.
If we defeat the amendment, does that mean we can't make that same amendment motion later? Does it preclude us from changing it to 3:30 in the future?
No.
That's because this is a council meeting and it's a motion on the floor that's been defeated and it may not be brought forward again unless it's the mayor who reconsiders it or what have you. But anyway, I'm just.
I'm thinking, I'm not sure we have to worry about that because I'm thinking by the time we get to actually making the change that I think Councillor Isaacson wants to make, it'll be in a different paragraph and a different number anyway. It won't be the same motion. We can make it as complicated as you want. I'm suggesting the simple way is not to make any amendments when we don't know what we're talking about and to defer what we're talking about until we have a better understanding of that.
Chair, I have my hand raised. I see you can't see me on the screen necessarily.
Now I can see you. It's hard, but the motion takes up a lot of room and you don't take up as much room on the screen.
Thank you, Chair. So my intention in doing these tonight was in theory to take care of some housekeeping amendments to save time for us next week. But I see that given that councillors have been looking at the two different documents, it would be great if we pass a version of the recommendation that comes from staff, then it would be clear that we would all be looking at the document that had gone through a legal review. We would all be looking at the same numbers, and I'm happy to send these to staff so that they're aware of the housekeeping amendments that I would plan to make. We've been making some suggestions, and our staff are going to be looking into clarifications. I see Ms. Lafort had her hand up a while back and did indicate that it was a typo. We just didn't happen to call on her, but she sent me a note saying it was a typo. So happy to defeat this motion. We can reconsider this motion in the future, focusing on the version that we are actually looking at in the next council meeting, and happy to defeat this and take care of it all in one meeting rather than taking care of some of them tonight. So happy to defeat it.
I'm going to call the motion on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment that's on the screen? Any opposed? Amendment is defeated. Now we had the main motion. Is that the motion you want to make?
Sure, Councillor Doubt, Chair. I will move the following. That the draft City of Powell River Procedure Bylaw 2756/2024, amended to include legal recommendations, be referred to the December 19th, 2024 regular council meeting for the first two readings.
Second.
That's seconded. That work for you, corporate officer?
It does, Chair. Thank you very much.
Yep, I think that's an okay. Councillor Palm?
Yes, through the chair, just for clarification to the corporate officer, can you please define the distinction, whether this would be, what changes if this is a first reading or two readings? What change brings about, whether it's just one or two?
Through the chair, it essentially just more time. So if you only do one reading, then it would extend the second and or third readings to further down the line. So if you're only doing one reading per meeting, it would just be on the floor longer. At this point, after first reading, after second reading, you can make amendments. Once third reading is made, we put out notice to the public that council will be considering adoption, and we'll have a specific date for that meeting. But we won't know that until we get to third reading. Thank you.
So just to clarify through the chair, whether it's one or two readings, it really doesn't change process. that what I've heard?
Through the chair, correct. It can still be amended after first or second. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Me too. It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Acting mayor rotation. Want to jump right in?
Yeah, this doesn't seem to have changed much from the prior couple of years, so I'll just move that council assign the 2025 acting mayor designation in alphabetical order by surname, changing the first of every month, starting with Councillor Elliott in January 2025.
Seconder? Do lots of them. Councillor seconded that. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Carried unanimously. No reports for information. We have a proposed bylaw, 2770 traffic bylaw amendment, and it would be time to adopt it if somebody wants to make that motion. Councillor Alameda seconded. Or moves it. Do we have a second?
I need to read it?
Yeah, it's a bylaw. You have to read it.
I'll move that the City of Powell River Traffic Bylaw 931, 1978, Amendment Bylaw 2770, 2024 be adopted.
Done. Councillor Elliott was seconding it. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Unfinished business. We don't have any new business. We don't have any no notice of motion. No closed meetings, and we're down to questions.
Chair?
Do you have any questions?
I kind of missed the opportunity, but I wanted to just say for the public's benefit that the bylaw that we just passed was the one that we have read earlier about changing parking fines and so forth. FYI. Thank you. Carry on.
I thank the acting mayor for the opportunity to ask some questions. My first pertains to item 7.1, which was the busing. And I was wondering if the ridership justifies the additional service hours proposed in the expansion program.
Bertig, you still there?
Yes, I am through the chair. I'm uncertain about the question, but I can let you know and council know that our ridership numbers have for the last 7 months been at a record pace. We've had for instance, just recently the best November that we've had since we started collecting data, and that's been the case for the last 7 months. So I would say that ridership is reflective of the needs to expand the system. Yes.
Through the chair to Director Bertig, then, are you reaching capacity in some of your buses?
Not perhaps on the school run, but no, not at overcapacity. Not at all. No.
A second question with regard to this, I'm wondering what initiatives the city is taking to increase the ridership in light of the fact that it wants to increase hours of service. Through
the chair, we are promoting it through our study, the service review, as well as trying to get advertising out there, working with the schools to see if we can increase their ridership.
I thank Mr. Bertig for the responses.
Hang on, Mr. Galinsky.
I see Director
Isaacson wants to.
Yes, I see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just wanted to add a couple points. Earlier, the frequency of buses was asked, and I think I checked out Route 1 and right now the shortest frequency happens once during the day, which is about half an hour. But usually on average, currently it's about during the weekday once an hour. And so the idea behind increasing frequency, which gets to the count that Councillor Doubt made earlier in the meeting, more frequency allows more people to what's called mode shift, which is to make a different choice around transportation because the frequency meets their needs, rather than showing up for a meeting 45 minutes early or 15 minutes late. They could be closer to the time without having a bunch of lag. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. The demand leads to an increase in service, but also an increase in service leads to an increase in demand. And so, when I vote for something like this, for me, both things are at play and are both in my consideration when making a vote to support increases in transit. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. So one of the biggest barriers to using our current transit system as a commuter for work is the low frequency, just too far away from where people need to be in order to get where they're going. And so we have our bulk of our ridership with youth and schools and so forth, and the frequency is more during that time, which allows for that. A schedule that was more designed to be a commuter-friendly service would naturally attract more people, particularly as it's super expensive to drive these days. And so making that a real option for workers in our community also makes it easier for folks who are in the service industry to get workers to work on time. And so that was one of the benefits to increasing frequency of ridership.
I'm wondering if council is encouraged by BC Transit's willingness to consider partnering or some other potential initiatives with regard to the Zunga bus.
Personally, I'll be more encouraged when they commit to spending money on it.
A fine response. I thank the acting mayor for that. With regard to item 7.3, which was a procedure bylaw, I had 3 questions, and one was with regard to delegations. And it seems to me that the recommendation is to pare it down to about 5 minutes rather than the existing 10. And I'm wondering the rationale behind this recommendation.
Officer, want to try that? As well, did you want to try answering that question?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't hear my name there. Certainly the intention is to just increase efficiency of meetings, and 5 minutes is quite common among other municipalities. So, as these meetings can get quite lengthy, there's a lot of items on the table that council is having to address. So with questions, it can get long. So it was simply an effort to increase efficiency at meetings. Thank you.
From my point of view, and I think everybody probably has a different one, is there are quite a few changes to the delegation section here. One of the changes trims down the amount of time spent on delegation and has a time limit for the presentation and a time limit for answers to questions. There's also hopefully some more information provided by the people making delegations that would provide answers to a form, basically an application form to be a delegation, which would give council members the opportunity to think about what the delegation was going to have to say and what they were talking about, rather than simply saying, I would like to appear as a delegation and not indicate anything about what the subject is going to be about. It allows for more than one person to be a delegation and clarifies a number of things. around the whole delegation thing. And now that's not the only opportunity people have to interact with council. And if you look at the whole bylaw, there is actually additional opportunities going along. But Councillor Elliott also wants to chime in.
So clearly none of us speak for council when it comes to rationale. We each have our own reasons for when we make decisions. I like what's happening in that part because as we evolve as a community, we have the expectation, similar to other communities that are growing, that we would have more delegations. And the standard seems to be closer to 5 minutes rather than 10 in many other communities. And if we're having room for, if we want to allow more people to be delegations, it's better to have lower timeframes to fit more in. This gives you a broader range of folks coming in to be delegations and doesn't, 3 delegations at 10 minutes is a half an hour. We could maybe have 6 delegates in that same amount of time and get a broader viewpoint from people. The increased areas where people get to comment on the things that are coming up for decisions, they don't have to apply for those. Actually, I'm not going to say that clearly because I'm not entirely sure about that. But there's other opportunities for specific types of feedback, and many people are more interested in that type of feedback. And so they won't be trying to be delegates to do those types of feedback. They'll be standing up and saying, I have an opinion on this thing you're approving today, and this is what it is. And so they don't need to be a delegate. And so the extra opportunities for input specific to what people are trying to bring to the meeting broadens and it shapes the meeting in a better way with better opportunities specifically designed for what people are trying to bring forward. The lower time limit on delegations will allow us to entertain more delegations instead of less.
Just as a rapid response to the councillor's statement, I believe the procedure bylaw limits delegations to 3 at committee of the whole and 1 at a council meeting. But that, go ahead. Yes, please.
So that is without permission, so the council can change that at any time. So we can entertain more depending on what's going on in that meeting. If we have a light meeting and we don't expect to be here till midnight, we could at any time change that. So that was to allow us some flexibility around that exact point. So we could have meetings that were lots of delegations if that's what we had intended for that meeting, but some meetings may not fit that.
I thank the councillor for the response. My next question was with regard to item 18 in the legal adaptation of the document, which was public input. And I'm not sure exactly how that might fit into the agenda. Perhaps the corporate officer could enlighten me, Acting Mayor.
Through the chair, if I may clarify the question, are you asking about order, Mr. Kalinsky, how it fits into the agenda, or process?
The order, more specifically, corporate officer. I was wondering what the agenda might look like with public input integrated.
I think I can help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you look on my document, the public input period is section 19. And I'm going to read it so everybody knows what I'm talking about, because there may be different versions. Members of the public input period, paragraph 1, members of the public, A, may make oral comment only regarding items listed under J, I, and M on the agenda for that meeting. Must first state their name and address for the record and may speak once up to 2 minutes. For a member, 2, where the member of the public wishes to provide comments electronically at a hybrid meeting, that person may provide comments in writing to the corporate officer or their designate no later than 1 p.m. on the day of the meeting, or make oral submissions in accordance with section 1, provided the person is virtually present in the hybrid meeting. The presiding member may provide additional direction respecting input And if you go to the agenda that's attached at the end, the items in the agenda that where you can get public input are I, J, and M. And I is items removed from the consent agenda. J is legislative matters like bylaws, variance permits, agreements in the financial plan. And M is new business, council verbal or written reports, etc. So those are 3 sections in the agenda where it will be available for public input that is not presently available for people to do. Now, there may be number changes because I've heard there's lots of drafts here. So Councillor Isaacson, everybody wants to comment. So Councillor Isaacson first.
Thank you. So specifically to your question, Mr. Galinsky, on where it fits in the agenda, if you look at, I'm looking always at the legal review version, but under section 5, there's an order of proceedings in business. And so it lays out exactly what the order is. And so the public input period would basically kind of be before the bulk of the meeting. So before delegations, before the consent agenda, before legislative matters like reports and bylaws, etc., unfinished business, committee recommendations, new business. So it's near the beginning. So if you check out section 25 in the attachment 4 legal review version, it's the order of the agenda is listed there, and you can see where public input period is.
That was very helpful. Thank you. And my last question pertains.
Galinsky.
Oh, pardon me?
More answers for you.
Oh, great.
I'm looking for one answer deal here. So Councillor Southcott has an answer as well.
I was just going to mention that the public input period section in the legally reviewed document has been quite modified from attachment 2. Essentially, it targets the same thing, but I also wanted to jump back a couple of comments, and that is that in discussion about delegations, now there's, I believe I understand this correctly, but there's been a bit of a differentiation so that members of the public can now comment through the public input period that delegation that might have previously been have been found access to council through delegations. So there's more opportunity now, but it's in 2 different sections in the agenda. It takes some reading to really understand what is being offered here, but it is more. It's more and differentiated than it was before, and I really appreciate that. I was trying to get to that, a week ago in the motion that I offered, but this facilitates that intention, if I'm not wrong. Thank you.
Councillor Alameda.
Oh, I actually didn't have any comments, so I would just, holding my hand, so no problem.
Okay. So, and I think the intention of this, and there's different drafts, and we're gonna have to figure out which language is which. The intention of this was to give an opportunity in the agenda before council makes a decision for people to come up and say, we'd like you to do this about what this item of business that's on the agenda, rather than we're angry that you didn't do that. Give people an opportunity to stand up and say, we see there's an issue about transit spending on there, and this is what we think about it. An opportunity in 3 different places on the agenda for people to have input before council makes a decision. If we get to that. Councillor Palm.
Through the chair, Mr. Galinsky, I appreciate your question in regard to delegations and public input, because what we just heard here is a prime example of the confusion that we're presented with right now with various versions and people referring to various versions of this procedure bylaw and delegations. And I am very much want to hear from the public in this regard, because certainly not my intent individually to limit delegations in this chamber, which has not been done up until now. And I see some of the wording here is problematic in that regard. So I'm not going to say any more on that subject today, but I will have plenty to say when it comes forward next week. Thank you.
Any more questions, Mr.?
If you can indulge me one more, Acting Mayor, I will ask it. And that's with regard to item 20 in the legal version, and that is consent agenda. I have been covering Cathet Regional District for a considerable period of time where consent agenda is a big part of their proceedings. And I was wondering if the city is looking at structuring any potential consent agenda along the lines of what is practiced at Cathet Regional District.
Officer, you have an answer for that.
Through the chair, essentially, yes. I believe the way consent agendas are handled, the Cathet Regional District is similar to best practices across other local governments. So that's the idea. There may be small nuanced differences, but until it's actually in practice, they can't necessarily speak to what those are. But yes, broadly, would be very much similar. Thank you.
I thank the acting mayor and council for indulging me in extensive and expansive questions. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stiff. Good afternoon, it's Sherry Burton. Thank you, Chair and Council, for the opportunity to ask questions. With regards to agenda item 7.3, I'm just trying to understand some of the amendments. I'll start with a really easy one. Under attachment 4, which is the legal review, 8B under section 19, which is delegations. 8H, I think. Yes, 8H, and it was asked legal recommendations for it to be removed, but in attachment 3, it is section 25H. It's still in there, so I'm just wondering if that's going to be removed.
Officer.
Through the chair, council's motion this evening was to move forward with the legally reviewed option. I understand the confusion between all of the versions, essentially because council's direction was also to see the differences from the current 2015 procedure bylaw and the changes, but then there was also a legally reviewed change. I tried to keep it as separate and simple as possible. That seems to have failed, but yes, moving forward, we will be working off of the legally reviewed option version in attachment 4. Thank you.
Thank you. With respect to in attachment 4 is item 19 delegations. It's item 20 in attachment 3. Subsection 8. It does not appear to have been in the draft that was considered under the legal review. So when was it added? It's a section with regards to corporate officer may refuse to place a delegation on the agenda, and then it talks about respectful workplace policy, etc.
Through the chair, I was just looking through the.
So it's in the attachment 3. It's under delegation, section 20, subsection 8. Can't tell you page numbers. Sorry, there's no page numbers.
So the question to the corporate officer was, according to a particular line number, when was that language added? And perhaps the corporate officer could respond to that later when you have time to think about the various drafts that you're looking at and where that change might have been made.
So in part and parcel to the question was when was it added, and it wasn't reviewed by the lawyer. I just want to know if it was or wasn't.
I understand your question. Councillor Alameda, do you have an answer for those questions?
I might, and I can understand the confusion in the two documents. As the corporate officer stated, we're going to be working off the legal review one to attempt an answer at Ms. Burton's question. Attachment 2, you're right, is section 20.8 is the corporate officer may review. I'm also looking at attachment 4, the legal review, that's where am I at here? Section 19, number 10, that has this starts off the same wording. The corporate officer may refuse to schedule a delegation on the agenda. So it appears on first glance that those paragraphs are similar, but just broken down into sub points a little bit more clearly. I think, does that answer the question you're looking for?
Well, it's just that in the attachment 3, it's quite extensive because it discusses the city workplace and prevention of harassment policy, and that it's the corporate officers can refuse it, which does lead into my next question of in the workplace, what section of the respectful workplace policy does it clarify that a corporate officer determines violations of same?
So answering that question, Councillor Elliott, you had your hand up to answer Burton's previous question.
Well, sort of. I had similar thoughts when I asked the question about whether the version that is under the legal reviewed includes the changes that the legal folks wanted us to make. So if something is in an earlier draft that isn't in this draft, that means the legal kicked it out. So the specific wording that is in the legal one is the one that's moving forward for consideration. Wording that was in previous drafts that have been kicked out, I'm assuming, was kicked out due to the legal review, and they didn't like that wording and kicked it out. So that's an assumption I made when I asked that question, and maybe that helps you to wonder what happened to the wording. It's gone because the legal review folks didn't like that wording, or they changed it to be more appropriate as far as the law goes. And perhaps it's gone because we're not using that anymore.
So in the legal review,
Ms. Burton?
oh, sorry. I was trying to find.
Just pause for a moment because Councillor Isaacson has an answer.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Isaacson had her hand up, or did you not?
I did not have my hand up. I think it's, yeah, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay, sorry about that, but Ms. Walls does.
Thank you, through the chair. I can confirm that it's one of those kind of rearranging for flow that legal did. So it's the same information, just rearranged. So in section 19 sub 2 sub D, it does say that delegations must comply with the city's respectful workplace policy. I think the other part of your question was which section of the policy, but I don't believe we're wanting to limit to any one section that they must comply with the full policy. Thank you.
So just in response to Councillor Elliott's information, under the legal review, when it talks about delegations, it only refers to a section to be removed that is pretty minor, and there's like no discussion about the legal review removing the part that in the attachment 3 talks about corporate officer may refuse, and then it goes on a discussion about respectful workplace. So I guess in the end, my question is this whole section in attachment 3 going to be in there, which is section 20 delegations, subsection 8.
Through the chair, that section, as I mentioned, is broken up into section 19. So part of it is in section of the attachment 4, section 19 2 D as in Delta, as well as section 1910. So it was just the same provision, just kind of just broken up into two. So it is still there. It hasn't been removed. Thank you.
Thank you for clarification. So the legal review has removed the portion about the respectful workplace policy.
Through the chair, no, they've included it in section 19 to D as in Delta.
Thank you. I have that circled here, but what I noticed was it didn't discuss about the corporate officer making the determination. So I see the corporate officer can refuse, but I don't see that it's the corporate officer who's going to apply the respectful workplace policy with regards to delegations.
Let the corporate officer answer the question. All the councillors have an hand.
Through the chair, sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you want me to respond, or was there a councillor to respond?
Oh, I want you to respond, corporate officer.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, Ms. Burton, the corporate officer does manage all of the delegation applications. The conduct of the respectful workplace, I think, is also understood that it will be managed in the council meeting, not necessarily by the corporate officer. So, you know, we still vet the corporate services still vets the application. If the submission wouldn't comply with the respectful workplace policy, it wouldn't be approved. And so I think that is, it's not just the corporate officer that would apply the respectful workplace policy. Thank you.
So hang on, Ms. Burton. That's the corporate officer's answer to that question. Councillor Palm wanted to make a comment. Hopefully,
I'm going to make a comment that hopefully not only helps me, but helps the public understand where we are in this endeavor, because it's very confusing when you have to flip back from electronic to document to electronic document. And that is, I'm going to request that Councillor Palm would like a hard copy of our current procedure bylaw. I would also like a hard copy of the legal review that we have received, that we are all going to be working from on the 19th. I was like a hard copy of the procedure bylaw comparison chart and a delegation application form fillable. I'd like a copy of that, and also attachment 6, draft council policy 269 committee system policy. I would like all of that in hard copy, and I would suggest to the chair that we make a few copies also available for the public to pick up by this Friday, since we're going to be dealing with this next Thursday.
Oh.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Alameda, do you have an answer to any of the questions that have been asked?
I think Ms. Burton was referring to the corporate officer's limitations or abilities to refuse. As the corporate officer stated already, the harassment and bullying policy was referenced in 19.2D, and then jumping further down in 19 on the legal review version, it gives the reasons why the corporate officer may refuse. And the second part there is in 10B is the corporate officer may refuse a delegation if the matter is contrary to this bylaw. And so my assumption is, since the bylaw states previously that it has to comply with the city's respectful workplace agreement, that would, my interpretation at least, is that then if it doesn't meet the harassment and workplace policy, then it would be contrary to the bylaw, which would then give the corporate officer the right to refuse the delegation. So I think it was just shifted around, as the corporate officer said, shifted around and reworded in an attempt to be a little bit more concise, or maybe, legalese, as some lawyers might say. But hopefully that, yeah.
Councillor Isaacson, you had an answer.
Yeah, I think you just wanted to, in addition to the corporate officers delegated authority to refuse a delegation if they feel that it's in contravention to the bylaw, someone can appeal, and that appeal process is described in this version. And also, it is up to council, as the deputy corporate officer mentioned. So there may be a time where a council or a delegation has been approved or on the agenda, but then during their presentation, council may feel, or a member of council may feel, that they're contravening the bylaw in some case, and then it's our responsibility to, either through the chair interrupting the delegation, or through a council member raising a point of order, to make sure that everyone sticks to the procedure bylaw. Thank you. So it's a dual responsibility.
Thank you. The reason why I've raised this, when one reads the respectful workplace, I won't do the whole title, policy, with regards to investigation and resolution, it talks about employees or elected official, but it doesn't set out what the procedure would be if it's a member of the public who's been told that the delegation is in violation of a respectful workplace. So that's why I was wondering why it was the corporate officer who's going to have that responsibility, and it's not, corporate officer is not given that authority under this respectful workplace policy. I don't suppose anybody wants to address that right now. I just wanted to finish off by saying that although the council procedure bylaw discussion started a year ago, I just wanted to remind everybody what the CAO said in July, just that this was a radically different document than the previous one. So, and that was what was presented publicly in July, causing some much concern and confusion, and we're still there. And the way it was presented on this agenda today, and given that the mayor is on medical leave, it has created a perception that this was kind of a calculated strategy to kind of push this all through.
Point of order, Chair. Staff determine the agendas, and it sounds like a critique of staff.
I'll just remind you, Ms. Burton, this is a period for questions, not for suggestions about people's motives.
I just thought you should be aware.
Just ask you to stick to questions, please. Before you go, Councillor Southcott wanted to respond to one of your questions.
I was just going to suggest that respect is all of our responsibility and the foundation for us, any of us, getting anything useful done together. So not just the corporate officers, not just the chairs, not just council, all of us. That's my take on that language.
Any other questions from the public?
Hi, Diana Collicutt. Thank you for deferring it to December 19th. There is a lot of confusion in the bylaw for the public, and it's evident just with our discussions today. But I wanted to ask a question about the acting mayor and the rotation. And I understand when the mayor is absent, there's an acting mayor will step in. But one thing that I find is an anomaly is the acting mayor is always chairing the meeting for the whole month while they're acting. And I don't know where in the procedure bylaw that is addressed. And so that's my question.
Well, I don't know where it is in the procedure bylaw. All I can tell you is that for the 8+ years I've been attending council, that's the process that it's always worked on.
Right.
Oh,
if it's a procedure, I think it should be itemized in the bylaw. And apparently that is not the norm in other communities. The mayor, while the mayor is present, is always chairing the meetings, not the acting mayor. So that's just something I would like council to consider. Thank you.
I disagree with you on that.
Okay.
Being the norm, there are numerous different ways to chair council meetings and committees of the whole. It's done different ways in different organizations and different councils, but it's interesting. Councillor Elliott has a suggestion.
Thank you. I know it was part of our old bylaw, which is the one we've been operating under all of this time. I don't know if it's in the new bylaw and whether that's something we're changing. I hadn't really thought about it. But I do know that it was part of the old bylaw, which is what the current bylaw of the day. I don't have that in front of me, but thank you for the question.
Councillor Alameda.
Yes, as for Councillor Elliott, thank you, Chair. Councillor Elliott stated 34.1 of the current bylaw does say the presiding member of the committee of the whole meeting shall be the current acting mayor. And that's been the policy since the 2 years I've been there, and as Councillor Dowd said, for the 8 years he's been there. So I don't know what other communities do, but every community does. Some people have a permanent acting mayor 12 months of the year. They don't rotate at all. So everyone does things a little differently.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. Just maybe one clarification from your comment, Ms. Colquitt, is the acting mayor historically hasn't chaired every meeting that month, but only the committee of the whole meetings. Usually, it's been happening recently because of the mayor's medical leave, but usually the mayor chairs the council meetings.
Okay, thank you. And because in the readings of the two versions of the draft procedure bylaw that's on the agenda, I never read that. So I'll go reread it again. And I'm just thinking that if it was in the old bylaw, it should be in the new bylaw, but something I wanted to point out. Okay, thank you.
Any questions online?
Point of privilege, Chair. Our deputy corporate officer had her hand raised.
Who has their hand raised?
The deputy corporate officer had her hand raised.
I didn't see it. So now it's up. I see it now. Deputy corporate officer, did you have a response to that question?
Through the chair, Councillor Almeida had largely addressed it. Ms. Colquitt, I can certainly send you the sections on both the previous and the new bylaw where those pieces are included. As well, the community charter does stipulate that when present, the mayor does have to chair the council meetings, but committee chairs are at the discretion of council. So just for further clarification, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any online questions? Councillor Elliott, do you have another answer to the question?
With respect to Ms. Colquitt's question around the chairing thing, the acting mayor chairing committee of the whole has been that way since I have been here. And my understanding from previous mayors and folks who explained that to me was that it was a decision to allow for development of council members, improving skills around chairing and understanding, and it was good for the city to develop councillors in that way. Some other folks have been around longer than me, maybe can speak to that, but I do support the idea of developing councillors in skills and chairing meetings, and it's good for the entire city and for the function of the council to understand what it's like to be there, and it's a team building as well, just because we all get a chance. But thank you.
Probably the right thing to do now is make a by Councillor Palm, seconded by favor. Opposed? Heard unanimously. We are adjourned. See you on the 7th.